Rupert Lowe, the MP for Great Yarmouth and former Reform UK figure, now leader of Restore Britain, is claiming over 120,000 members, many of them young people, frustrated with rising house prices, high taxes, stagnant wages, and a general sense that the system is no longer working for them, saying that the polls have gone up to 7%. And the polls do show that. I've really got to be honest, like, am I concerned about it? No. Do I need to be? At this point, I'm unsure. I'm not quite sure, but there does seem to be this growing-ish, not one that's like threatening popularity with Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe, in classic Rupert Lowe fashion, puts out a monologue, a mammoth of a tweet, because that's all he does. And unfortunately for you, I'm going to read some of it, not all of it. He says, I'm with the young British men and women who feel crushed under inflated house prices, stagnating wages, record tax burden, and just generally a really piss poor standard of living that is falling embarrassingly far behind countries we once competed with. My question to them is, is the status quo what you want? Because if it is, there are a variety of parties to vote for. If you want something radically different, and I mean radically, then Restore Britain is giving you that option. Ask yourself, does the current model work for you? Restore Britain doesn't want to reform the establishment. We want to smash this up. Do you? If you want more of the same, vote for it. Tories, Reform, Labour, Lib Dem, go for it. Your choice, same faces, same model, same decay. The Greens want to accelerate our transformation into a third world dump. If that's what you want for Britain, Polanski is your man. Certainly don't vote for Restore Britain. We want a fundamentally different economic model, one that gives young British men and women the freedom to pursue their own goals, whether that's building their family, business, or own financial freedom. That's what we're about. We're going to be honest, and we're going to take the difficult decisions required to benefit us all. That very much includes the young Brits who for their entire lives have been ripped off by a decadent political establishment that cares about votes and only votes. Restore Britain will treat you all with the respect and honesty you deserve. There is a political party that's finally your side. Restore Britain is on your side. Oh, blah, blah, blah. AI. It's like he does everything apart from put a policy agenda together. Like, when are they going to do that? Man of the people, apparently. Listen, if you want to aim low, just vote low. The saddest part is that young people are lapping it up. Just go on Twitter and you'll find like a plethora of young people who are obviously angry, rightfully so, at what's happening in Britain, but are also backing the likes of Lowe, who are parroting this bullshit at them on Twitter. Because if you are genuinely asking why young people cannot afford housing, you have to look at the financialisation of the housing market, and we could, genuinely, all roads lead back to Thatcher. Like, just look at Thatcher. We can't have a conversation about housing without talking about Thatcher. The role of landlords, I was speaking about earlier, the way properties become an investment vehicle rather than a basic need, this thing that's become part of the asset class, and at decades of at decades of policy decisions that have prioritised asset growth over accessibility. Can also talk about stagnant wages, looking at labour markets, declining bargaining power, insecure work, and the broader distribution of wealth within the economy. But none of those explanations are being centred here. We're not talking about structural issues, because we know what Lowe does. He frames his arguments around migration and who's British and who isn't, and England for the English, and blah, blah, blah. It's always towards migration and towards culture and towards the idea that the system would function properly if only certain groups were removed or restricted. And that isn't a new political strategy. We've seen this time and time again throughout the decades. It's very well established. He's talking about smashing the establishment, but I think he's certainly part of the establishment, and you guys are very much aware of that too. It's far easier to tell people that their problems are caused by those with less power than it is to challenge those who hold the most power. I was having a conversation, sorry, such a digression, with someone recently who said, but I'm going to vote Rupert Lowe because, not me, by the way, but I'm going to vote Rupert Lowe because Rupert Lowe gives his MP salary to charity. That's not a policy or a political agenda. Like, that's just what he wants to do. I don't know. It's something to unpack. But I think what's really interesting is that, Nigel Farage has dismissed Restore Britain as temporary, which suggests that this is not just about ideology, but about competition over the same political base. And that base is being shaped by real economic pressure. People are fucking frustrated, of course. But instead of offering solutions that address the root causes of that pressure, what we're seeing is a competition over who can provide the most compelling narrative about who is to blame. Let me go to Mike. Mike, I know you probably, you've got quite a lot to say on this, but do you see this 7% for Restore as a genuine political shift amongst young people, or more of a reaction to economic pressure without a clear ideological direction?
I don't suspect it will hold. I think the anger is completely real, right? Young people in this country are dealing with housing they can't afford. There's wages are not keeping pace with the cost of living. This is a really brutal environment for people who are under the age of 40. So I do think that anger is legitimate, and obviously we've spoken about it previously on this show. It should be taken very, very seriously. Like, there should be a political agenda by all parties to speak to those people under the age of 40 who are struggling to buy homes, etc. That's fundamentally real. But when you read Rupert Lowe's tweet, and he loves a long tweet, by the way. Have you seen? Don't know if people seen that meme of,
Loves it.
like, I'm not reading all of that, but I'm happy for you that it happened, or sad, or whatever. Like, that's exactly how I feel whenever I see one of his long tweets. I'm like, bro, I'm not reading that. Someone to summarize it for me. I can't be doing with Rupert Lowe, honestly. I just cannot be doing with Rupert Lowe. But, like, his long tweets are really, like, there's loads of vibes, and there's not really, like, any policy solutions. It's just, like, it's all about immigration. It's generally just like, and it's the migrants' fault. It's just literally how every Rupert Lowe tweet seems to end. Like, him talking about smashing it up, it's not really a policy agenda. It's like, it's a slogan. It's just saying things. The idea that London resembles, third world, it's going to resemble a third world country. All of it's just this kind of like real racial grievance. But he thinks speaks to young people. I think most young people don't think the problems they face are because of immigration or because of growing diversity, all of these things. Young people know that the issues they face are far more complicated and far more structural than just simply immigration, right? So I think this is a classic thing that those on the right are doing. And I include the Conservatives as well, right? The Conservatives also, for years and years, have weaponized immigration as a problem, and weaponized immigration as the real problem that people face. But as we mentioned earlier, Sarah, they say nothing about landlordism. They say nothing about stagnant wages. They say nothing about the decline of trade unions and the rising insecure work. They say nothing about those things. There's nothing about raising the wealth, raising wealth taxes, all these things that could actually structurally make the country much better. Instead, a lot of these political agendas these people represent on the right is about protecting capital at the expense of labour and demonising migrants. And this is fundamentally just will not win. This will not be successful long term. This will not help things get better for young people. And I think a lot of it is just really, really empty. And it is interesting that Rupert has kind of emerged as a threat for reform. And I wonder how long term Farage does deal with that. In terms of, like, potentially eating into some reform space, that might actually be good for those of us who maybe fear reform, kind of general election win. If Restore Britain going to eat into some of their votes, potentially that might be a good thing. But fundamentally, I think Reform and Restore share a lot of things in common. He speaks so fluently about these issues of migration and the asylum system and the way in which Britain's a third world dump and all these kinds of things. But when you actually really dig deep and really think about, okay, what are the solutions being offered by Lowe, by Reform, by these different parties on the right? They're very empty. Again, it's very high on vibes. It's very, like, loads of long paragraphs on Twitter, loads of kind of empty speeches. And when it comes to actual deep solutions or kind of even convincing solutions, none of it's there. It's just very, very empty. A lot of bluster, a lot of noise about migration with no solutions to help us.
Really well said. And Rupert Lowe's bloody loser. Like, you're actually so right. You're so right. Whenever he writes these long tweets, like, it is just vibes. It's like, what can I do that's going to score some points? Because I saw there was a tweet that I put in the script, but then it got deleted and the account left, so obviously it might have been some sort of bot. But someone was like, well, I'm a young person and I'm going to vote for Restore, like, because they say all the right things on Twitter. And I'm like, exactly, it's on fucking Twitter. Like, it's this loser site that has all these bots that I think lacks credibility and substance now, in a lot of ways, because people are just trying to grift from Twitter, and say what's right at the time in relation to just societal woes. So I personally don't see Restore as a threat. Personally, I think they're just this party where those who are radically right who feel that reform aren't right enough for them will go even further right, because Restore do a really good job of blaming explicitly black and brown people for Britain's problems. And I think whenever I've done a Restore story, there's always been the most horrendous comments from Restore supporters, essentially pointing to who I am as an individual, which is a black woman who it takes from British society. So that tends to be the rhetoric, the avenue that they go down. So I see them as a baseless, substanceless party that just want to grift. Yeah, they this whole, like you said, smashing the establishment is actually just BS, to be honest.
I completely agree with you, Sarah. I think, what Restore do, maybe in a more pointed way than Reform, is really speak to young men. And it's very like, the sort of guy you would have seen on the Manosphere, who might be kind of like listening to his Toki and Andrew Tate.
HS Tiki Toki. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm miles off it there. But that kind of person, right? I think they're trying to speak to those people, those kind of audiences. And again, I don't think he has any solutions for these people. I think he's pandering to a very reactionary masculinity. And there is a big ecosystem of these kind of people, right? These kind of people who feel they understand young men's sense of economic frustration and have the solutions for them. And actually, they don't. Andrew Tate hasn't got a solution for young men, nor is his Toki or whatever his name is, and nor does Rupert Lowe. These three people and beyond, right? This whole manosphere environment, which I think also incorporates some politicians who pander to this kind of anger that young men might be feeling. I really want young men to understand that these men do not have the solutions to the problems you face. They're not going to help things become cheaper or better. They're not going to help you find a home. They're going to help you have a stronger sense of belonging in society. They're going to make you even more angry. They're going to, they're going to pin the blame on the people who want to blame, and we're going to be further and further away from the solutions that we actually need. So I think it's compelling to young people because it's a very emotional story, right? It's kind of like good versus evil, which is always like a convincing story. Like, we're the good guys, you young working hard men. These are the bad guys, these migrants who are coming here, taking your jobs, and I'm going to do something about it. That can be a very compelling and simple story, but as we know, the reality is far more complex than this kind of good versus bad. It's a lot more grey, there's a lot more structural issues at play, there's a lot more hard work than just like blaming migrants. The solutions we need are, far more than just blaming migrants. So yeah, I think it's a far more pointed strategy than what, Reform are doing. Reform definitely lean on anger. But I think there's something about Restore leaning on kind of like the anger of men, and it speaks to kind of manosphere and the sort of stuff that Louis Theroux kind of uncovered in his documentary on Netflix.